this is the first generation since the Depression, the Great Depression in the 1930s, where an appreciable number of young men do not believe that they'll be able to enjoy a lifestyle that is equal to or greater than that their parents provided for them.
If you're smart, from society's perspective, you're supposed to go to college. But then you go into a job market that doesn't hire you after you've spent maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars going to college. So I don't want to go that way. But the other way is the trades, and that's for the dummies. So now I'm stuck in this middle kind of no man's land. And I think that's dangerous. I think we need to change the stigma around the trades.
Women generally, in testing on social skills, outperform men by 25 to 35 percentage points.
Wow.
Yeah, not surprised.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to get into a topic that's been getting more and more attention. Men falling behind in school, at work, and even in their health. And we've spoken kind of tangentially about this in the past. But today, we're bringing an expert on. We're joined by Harvard Business School professor Joseph Fuller, who's been studying these trends for years. And if you're a man who's ever felt stuck or someone who cares about the men in their life, this conversation will help you understand what's really happening and what can be done about it. Now, before we jump in, we also want to acknowledge something important. Historically, in regards to men, or in this regards, men have often been seen to have the upper hand in education in the workforce, and we get that. But things are changing, and looking at the data today, many men are quietly slipping behind, and shining a light on that doesn't dim the light on women. And we're not talking about an either-or zero-sum game. We're talking about how we all do better when everyone has the opportunity to thrive. So I want to make sure I put that disclaimer out there before we got started. Professor Fuller, Joe, welcome to the show. We're very excited to have you. And Will, always good to see you, my friend.
Great to be here. Thanks for coming, Joe.
Jon, Will, delighted to join you and your audience.
Thank you.
Here we are. And just say, hey, Men Talking Mindfulness is a way to plug in what we're doing. And you can join our Spartan race we're doing on October 19th down outside of Dallas. So Men Talking Mindfulness, join us in Dallas. And we'll tease. We have a new program coming up that's going to be coming out in December. We're going to tease it a little bit here. So get ready for that. So we're just going to do our one breath grounding practice so we can center and focus. And let's just start with a nice little exhale all the way out. Maybe close the eyes if you like. Really get empty of your breath. Completely empty. Maybe a little bit more. And let's take a big giant inhale. Fill into your belly and into the middle of your torso, all the way to the top, even into your head. Hold that breath here for 3, for 2, 1, and exhale out the mouth. Nice and easy, nice and slow, grounding through that exhale into this moment, into this space and time. And awesome. Thanks for being here, everybody. Joe, pleasure to be here. Jon, kick it over to you for our first question.
All right. So, yeah, we're going to kind of set the stage for why all this matters for every man, well, everyone listening. So, why, Joe, do men tie so much of their identity and self-worth to their jobs?
I think that's a cultural expression. Historically, men were always characterized as the provider. And I think it's also in settings, whether school or work, men are much quicker to essentially compare credentials. It's everything from, did you make the varsity, or, where'd you go to school, and so in terms of sense of self-worth, ability to provide for a spouse and children, make themselves respected by other people, especially other men, being able to replicate the lifestyle that their fathers or grandfathers provided, all provide reference points. And as you'll know, this is the first generation since the Depression, the Great Depression in the 1930s, where an appreciable number of young men do not believe that they'll be able to enjoy a lifestyle that is equal to or greater than that their parents provided for them.
I know this is a very broad question, but from your perspective, what's the major cause of this?
The inability to aspire to that. There are a lot of forms of work that were historically male domains. Um, and it's not just, strong back work, but it's also work that had a mechanical engineering or a civil engineering type basis, that the absolute share of those types of jobs in the economy has shrunk. The growth has been in two areas: lower paying service jobs, and in higher paying, to use the technical term, cognitive work jobs. So lots of different tasks requiring different types of techniques, good communication skills, um, and an array of skills that we call social skills. Sometimes they're called power skills, foundation skills. The old literature called them soft skills, which really have to do with the effectiveness of interacting with others, teaming with strangers, empathy, a whole kind of bushel basket of things.
Emotional
W-
intelligence,
That's
that kind of
that's a
thing.
big
Yeah.
subset. So, women generally in testing on social skills outperform men by 25 to 35 percentage points.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah,
and,
not surprised.
well, if you're in an audience and it's 50-50 gender, half the audience will be shocked and half will say, "Are you kidding me?" "You teach at Harvard,
Really?
you think
Yeah.
that's an
Yeah.
insight?" Um,
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
and then women have been, for those higher paid jobs, have been gaining share of academic credentials. Women are almost 60% of adults enrolled in college today are women. They're a majority of all master's programs or a majority of all PhD programs. That doesn't mean every type of PhD. So they're 20% of computer science PhD candidates, but they're 80% of Romance language PhD candidates. But all PhDs added together, a majority. And by the way, that's true in Germany, that's true in the UK, that's true in India, it's true in Korea. So this is a bit of a worldwide phenomena. And all those economies, to a degree, have suffered the same type of bleed off of the types of jobs that were historically heavily concentrated with men workers.
So this is not um, necessarily something that's new. It's something that's been building for a while. And do you see any path to changing that?
Well, yes, but
Okay.
it's going to be a demanding path, and it will require the type of data-driven, clear-eyed decision making that is not the hallmark of a lot of the institutions that would have to change. Give you a couple examples. Um, when digital technology started to come on the scene and started being adopted by K through 12 systems, they basically used it to automate the way they taught today.
Mhm.
So, and the way they had always taught. So it was, we're going to move the textbooks to tablets. You're going to submit your homework on tablets. What didn't we do? We didn't add significant curriculum on digital technologies. So in Russia, every high schooler takes 4 years required what's called informatics, kind of the study of information technology, networks, how they work, software. That's where Russian teenage hackers come from. It's not that they have some different genetic inheritance, but like any educational experience, they get a distribution of terrible students and good students, but everybody's got to study it. You get a lot more absolute good people at the end. We don't teach social skills. So think back to like 10th grade biology. You're going to do the frog dissection.
Yep.
Mm.
The teacher's looking out and he or she is not going to say, okay, I'm going to tell people who's on each team and I'm going to build the teams exclusively around the principle of I've never seen the kids on any given team in a conversation before and after class, in the cafeteria. I'm not going to let the basketball players or the cheerleaders or the goths or whomever be their own team, because I'm going to teach them they have to work. A goth's got to work with the football player or the smart girl or the debate captain or whatever. So we'd have to be thinking about that. We also have to get much more serious about the kind of career and technical education opportunities that are offered to people. In the 70s, we basically criminalized what was then called voc ed, vocational education, where you could get on a track in getting your high school diploma to start studying to become a master carpenter, start studying auto repair, culinary, whatever. And because in a lot of school districts, that was used pretty cynically for tracking, particularly for segregating high schools and tracking lots of racial minorities into voc ed. Most voc ed programs kind of ground to a halt. And we replaced it with a philosophy of college for all,
Yeah.
except only about 40% of today's 18-year-olds will ever graduate from a 4-year college.
Wow.
So what about the 60%? Up here at Harvard, when I have an alumni audience and I ask them to guess what percentage of, high school graduates this year are going to graduate from college, they're guessing 85, 90, because their kids went to college and their friends went to college. We have to revisit career paths, and we have to revisit training for people after they get out of school.
Well, there's reading your article, there's just such it really started. I don't know what happened in 1979, but the numbers from 1979 to today on almost every single indicator, whether it's jobs, salary, education, men and boys are declining rapidly. Yeah, I'm even seeing my own. I have a large family back in Pennsylvania. The younger generation is coming through. They're all, in their early 20s and late 20s, and there's only, a small percentage of them that have gone to college. A lot of them are just kind of flailing, wondering what to do. Some of them will pick up the trades as well, and because it's almost like they have. I don't see when I was growing up and John was growing up, there's this kind of this gumption to have a career, like get out, do something, identify yourself with this career. And that just seems to have gone away tremendously. And let's just dive in and talk about maybe some of the reasons why, the big reasons why this is kind of happening, and not just, like you said, the United States, it's seeming like across every culture across the planet. So it's really fascinating.
There are a lot of causes, and there are great sociologists who study this and various subtopics, but I think there are 3 or 4. One is that starting around 1980, you started getting the Reagan-Thatcher deregulatory movement. And then, of course, toward the end of the decade, we won the Cold War. You had the so-called Washington Consensus, which was based on the ultimately invalid premise that if you had more free trade, that would lead to civic engagement and maturation of countries. So pretty much everyone would be running electoral democracy and the so-called end of history hypothesis. But free trade really struck at the heart of a lot of particularly northern male employment in the United States, the Detroits, the Pittsburghs, the Baltimores. The second thing you had is over time, the way I think of it is that schools, in part, in parallel, aided by kind of increasing instances of diagnoses of things like ADHD. I'm older than you guys, but nobody in my high school had ADHD. At least no one knew what to call it that if they did. And I know a couple who probably would now be diagnosed with it. We started medicating a lot of kids, disproportionately boys. We started
Mhm.
running schools like boys should act more like girls. And I don't mean
Yeah.
that in any kind of gender role playing. I just mean
No, I
you're
get it.
supposed to
Better
sit
students.
there and not be
Yeah.
energetic and not be roughhouse and not have your attention. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know what
Yeah.
part of either parenthood or instruction in getting their teaching degree people missed, but um, the and then of course we started having a lots of other distractions. I mean, I can remember when the first video games came out, and you were playing like paddleball and things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Atari
Um,
Pong.
2600, right?
there you
Remember those
go.
days?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
now of course you've got NVIDIA's fortunes are based on doing incredible technology for video game graphics. And so there are a lot of distractions, a lot of allure. I think another thing, I'm going to say two things are almost contradicting each other. I think it's been a big problem in the United States that we've essentially professionalized sports for kids.
Mm.
It's a big
Oh,
business, these travel teams
mm,
and
$40
yeah.
billion business. 40 billion
Wow.
exactly.
I didn't
for
know
youth
that.
sports.
Wow.
I got lots of friends. My kids were D1 athletes in an obscure sport, by the way. They were
What was it?
rowing,
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah. I
like the
rowed crew.
world's worst Oh, did you? Well, they did too.
I
And
did.
it's a terrible spectator sport. But in any case, the we've got lots of kids who are specializing in some sport when they're 10 years old. They're playing 30 weeks a year. Half of them end up injured or hating the sport by the end of it. But that's a big distraction. People who think their kids are going to get full ride scholarships because they're the leading goal scorer on the 8-year-old soccer team. I mean, what you can't, it's just so it's crazy. And then
Almost like kids, I feel, play for like the highlight reel. They want to be like on ESPN. Like they almost take the
exactly.
fun out of the sports.
Oh,
You know what
oh
I
my
mean?
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
I was,
they
I had my nephews, great kids. Neither one of them have gone to college, by the way, which is not a knock. That they're choosing their own path. But I remember going to a baseball game and sitting in the stands with them, and this one kid got up and he wasn't very good. He struck out, and my nephews were like, "It's like he's playing the game just for fun."
Oh my God
And
forbid.
I was like, heaven forbid, right? I was like, that's what
That's
that's
great.
what I
That's
played
great.
for
That's great.
growing up.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Wow.
The
Well, just
but
yeah.
the contrary argument is that the Department of Defense will tell you that 70% of teenagers are not qualified to enlist
Yeah.
because they can't
Mhm.
meet the fitness goals or they've got
Mm.
mental health issues, drug issues,
Yeah.
they've been arrested.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and so we've got a combination of people being distracted in terms of just being
Yeah.
kids and learning, and
Yeah.
too many
Mm.
people that are in the basement with their PlayStation and, can't run a mile, don't try out for a sport. And notice how I think boys as teenagers particularly, they just need to be good at something that other boys respect. It can be being a good ball player. It could be being a good guitar player. You hope it's not you're the best Dungeons and Dragons. I don't really know much about games, but I'm just going to call it that player or the, but they suddenly kind of start falling into this abyss
Mm.
at a time, by the way, when mental health issues tend to start manifesting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just interesting that like, I was an athlete growing up, John was as well. Like, and now, and just talking about sports in this context, it's like sports is really, it helps to create discipline, right? It helps to exercise and, our new testosterone in our body. Like, what do we do with this stuff? It added a tremendous amount of confidence in my life, but just being able to be accomplished in the physical realm, which is very masculine. And then what happens when you start taking that away and then, and instead of them being out there, messing around, fucking off, having a good time, playing the game just for the fun of the game, now it's now it's added. Now they have video games that they're playing with. Like they're always like sit and the sedentary, and we really have taken so much of that physicalness that is so important for us as men and everybody, but definitely as men. Like I think testosterone is something that is incredibly powerful for us, right? But also can really work against us. And I feel like this is part of the conversation. We're not exercising our body, and gaining that confidence as we exercise. It's like I can see it just going downhill.
And look at least two other things that happen. I bet each one of us could name, and while doing it, smile at the best coach we ever had. We got coached.
Absolutely.
We got
Great point.
told,
Exactly.
you
Yes.
you can't cross your legs there, or that
Right.
was a blind
Mhm.
pass. You're going to get somebody killed.
Right.
And then
It had to be part of the team, right? Like
and
how
you
to
had to be
coordinate with
part of
other
the team.
people.
Even
Right.
if you didn't
Big
like,
difference.
you were the left tackle and you didn't like the left guard, you liked winning
Right.
better than you wanted to show him up. So,
Mm.
a lot of life lessons there. Now, it seems like that's almost like I'm saying, well, people should play sports. No, they shouldn't. What I'm really saying is more people should play sports, and it shouldn't be nearly so professional. And I'd much
Right.
rather see a 15-year-old who's playing football, basketball, and lacrosse as opposed to soccer, hockey, all seasons,
That's true. That's a
which I
great
think
point.
takes a lot of the joy out of it.
Absolutely.
Mm.
I mean, I remember I ran track and cross country, and as a matter of fact, we're going back in just under 3 weeks to do a high school track and cross country reunion,
Oh, great.
because that was who we were close to. It wasn't our classmates necessarily, but it was everybody across classes that were running and being part of that team, both boys and girls. And we still call our coach to this day. I still call him coach. It's been 30 something years since I've run for him. I still call him coach. But I also want to come to the flip side of that. I forget who I was speaking with recently about teachers and young teachers, for our first, second, third, I mean, all the way to like 8th grade. In my life, all of my teachers were women. And what role does that play in boys' development and potential growth in education? I mean, I've got 3 kids, one of them a boy, and what I tell my daughters doesn't resonate with him. When I tell my daughters want to sit down and be quiet and play with whatever it is they play with, but then my boy wants to run around and climb things and jump off of things, and he's got that energy. But then you have female teachers, and I thank you, God, for these teachers. But how would men, and I know there's also a feeling like if men come in for young students for 2nd, 3rd grade, there's also a stigma about why is a man teaching 1st grade?
Yeah.
And then from the parents' perspective, a little bit of fear, like, okay, what's
Who
that
is
all
this guy?
about? Right? Who is this guy? Right?
Right.
There's a lack of trust of men teaching that
Jesus.
age than the other way around.
Yep.
So sorry,
Yep.
I just kind of went off on my own monologue
I'm
there,
with
and
you,
I don't know if I came at you with a question.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
There is a significant shortage of men in K through 12 education. It's the part of it is the inverse of what I was saying about gender and jobs that historically attracted them. There's a significant growth in categories of work like home healthcare aide, what are called associated skills in the healthcare system, such as nursing, teaching, social work, that have always had, or certainly in the last 40 years, significant majorities of women. The combination of larger class sizes, in some jurisdictions, standardized testing that affects teacher performance ratings, the fact that you have women who are not always the role model for boys that they need beyond their dads or their whatever adult males are of their lives. Um, all of that combines uh, to make it very hard for uh, the majority of people who are teaching these grades, women, to really. It takes a very good teacher to be able to accommodate your son and your next door neighbor's girl that's in his class. And you have all these other things that happen, like most forms of discipline that were rendered in school are now problematic. I'm not talking about hitting somebody with a belt, but speaking sharply to a child.
Mm-hmm.
Now you might very well end up as the teacher being in hot water with the principal because the parents are calling up and said, he told Johnny, he told Jimmy. So the whole thing has kind of become a perfect storm. And the 2/3 of the bottom decile performers in K through 12 education in the US are boys, and only 1/3 of the top decile are boys.
Mm. Wow.
So, and it's just like a stair step pattern from the bottom decile to the top decile. Every decile you go up in performance, it becomes more girls. So school is kind of engineered better for girls. And there's another reality here, which is girls become neurally mature much earlier than boys.
Yeah, I'm seeing that
So
in my kids
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you talked about the professions. Historically, nurses have been women, and I've found that a lot of men, when they're referring to a male nurse, will say, "Oh yeah, he's a male nurse," instead of just, "Oh yeah, he's a nurse," or "He's a male school teacher." And it's wild that that's kind of what we have to put that word in front of the profession so that there's not I don't know, a thought about it.
By the way, a lot of male nurses are foreign.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
Yeah, because it's
Right.
much more common to have males in nursing in Latin America, in Europe.
Interesting.
So there's definitely a kind of a cultural
There's a
undercurrent
stigmatism
to a
or
lot of
something,
these. Yeah, whether it's
Yeah.
stigma or just it doesn't occur to people. I mean, it's
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, um, your uncle doesn't say, "Hey, have you ever thought about becoming a nurse?"
Right.
Right. It's always about
Maybe,
becoming a doctor or more per
or
se. And
Surgeon.
yeah.
or are you
Yeah.
going to make the starting nine?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how,
Very true.
what sport are you going out for? How about whomever the Eagles, since you mentioned you're from Pennsylvania. Now in Boston, we're still angry about that Super Bowl, so let's not talk about that anymore.
I definitely, I saw that again, coming back to my nephews, what was very important in their lives, and it still is the Dallas Cowboys. I grew up in Louisiana, 4 hours from Dallas, so everybody assumes, hey, you're a Louisiana guy. Why aren't you supporting the Saints? Well, we're further away from New Orleans than we were from Dallas. So Dallas was our team, and man, they were obsessed with the Cowboys, and rarely spoke about school or what they were going to do afterwards. I mean, I remember asking my nephew, one of them, when he was 16, I was like, "So what is it that you're going to do?" And he was like, "I don't know. I haven't really thought about it." And I remember when I was 16, I was already thinking what I was going to do when I was 20, when I was 30. And I'm not necessarily saying that's what we should do, but I've also seen a change in mindset because of society. It doesn't feel as though we're pushing them, almost as though we're not pushing them enough to consider other career choices.
There's a cascade out of that, John, that's really important to understand. About early 2000s, companies started deploying what's called an applicant tracking system. It's AI powered. It's not particularly smart. It's not like Grok or, OpenAI in terms of its AI, but, AI's existed for a while. And what it does is it evaluates your application for a job versus the requirements for a job. So it'll upload using natural language processing the job description. And a company can also set filters. So there are lots of filters you can choose. So one of them inevitably is will you accept a candidate who has a criminal conviction? Will you accept a candidate that admits to being arrested? Will you accept a candidate with less than 3 years experience? Whatever. Bunches of them. And by the way, there's essentially 100% penetration of that in the US economy, because even if you don't have your own, if you're interested in opportunities at our corporation, click here on your website, you're using Indeed, ZipRecruiter, something like that. Okay. So other than, I'm hiring, kids for summer ice cream scooping, or, I own a screen printing one door business. And when someone's about to quit or retire, I kind of ask the other workers and somebody's cousin what needs a job or whatever else. Now, when if you don't know what you're going to do and you get out of high school and you don't really have any special skills, you want to make some money and you're willing to show up and listen. I'm not saying you're a bum, but what type of job are you qualified for? Not much, retail, fast food, driving Uber. But in the intermediate term, in the labor market, you are what you eat. You get rapidly from I could theoretically do anything to, oh, you had a seasonal construction job and then you worked at a Cracker Barrel for 6 months, and then you had 3 months not working, and then you're working at a Chick-fil-A. When you send that resume to an entry-level brand manager job or entry-level bookkeeper job because you, in the meantime, got a credit at the community college in bookkeeping, you will not get interviewed. So then what happens? You start drifting into the jobs you can get, which builds up more and more scar tissue of what Joe is. Joe is qualified to be a shift worker in fast food, and the more that record, the harder it is to escape.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it becomes your identity, in some ways.
Exactly.
And that's
In a
that's
work
a big part
identity.
of this. Right, right. And then you just kind of falling, well, that's all I'm qualified for. That's, and then you start believing that instead of like, you can, like you said, you can really do anything, and I think it's good to have education. It's good to have like a skills-based kind of trade that you can fall into. But like there's a lot of young men out there that come out of school, they're kind of educated in a system that, they're just trying to get through. Like, it's very uninteresting. And then they come out and they're like, I don't know what to do because I wasn't stimulated in school. I didn't have those male mentors maybe that can help me, like, push me in the right direction or actually get me to try something. And here we are with, like, I'm decades into, according to your research and other people in your in this article, that we're just have this massive dip of employment, of and an incredible rise of drug abuse, of suicide, of violence. And it's just really just so incredibly disheartening because we do have the ability, in this country to make something of yourself if you really want to. But we kind of, I feel so much we're losing, we don't have those mentors. We don't have that stimulation in the education system that really helps to create like boys that are turning into men of like quality and like can see themselves really doing something that's great or extraordinary and envisioning themselves in that way. And then they get locked in this cycle like you're talking about of just above minimum wage, not really doing much of anything. And not really, I think it's a big part of this, is like really waking up that, your creativity on the inside, right? Your strength on the inside that you have, and then putting that into the world. Like we talked earlier about, like developing confidence in sports. It's like, the work I've been doing continually gives me more confidence, to keep going further, ask bigger questions, and create a bigger platform. So I'm just like making some comments here, but it's just so disheartening for men, to read this about men, and especially younger men as well. I don't have a question there per se. I'm just like,
Well, I'll jump on it,
venting. Yeah.
Will. If it seems as though some of the discussion has gone down this path already, and some of it hasn't, but they're looking at college graduates. Some of them, have very high level degrees, and they're not getting good jobs. And there's a lot of college debt, right? And so a lot of young boys or people in general are probably looking at that, and they're like, well, I don't want to go to college so that I don't get a job, and it costs me a lot of money to go to college. And then the flip side, a lot of kids are looking at the trades, and they're like, well, there's a stigma against being a plumber. There's a stigma against being an electrician, which is ridiculous because those are great jobs, and they're basically AI proof. So that there's a lot of goodness in going into the trades, but I think there has been this stigma in growing up that the people in the trades are dumb, which also is not true. So it's a catch-22, right? If you're smart, you're supposed to, from society's perspective, you're supposed to go to college. But then you go into a job market that doesn't hire you after you've spent maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars going to college. So I don't want to go that way. But the other way is the trades, and that's for the dummies. So now I'm stuck in this middle kind of no man's land, and I think that's dangerous. I think we need to change the stigma around the trades.
I agree. The trades many of them are quite physical too. So the fitness and the willingness to work outdoors, for anyone who's listening who thinks, being a plumber is not a great idea. I happen to know my plumber drives a better car than I do. So, he made an emergency visit once, and that was a nice car.
What am I doing wrong? Right.
I want to just call out something related to education, the cost of education. The biggest problem in accumulated student debt is a category called some college, no degree. So if you go for a year or two and you're borrowing and then you don't finish, you have 0% shot at the college premium, unless you're the occasional genius that leaves Harvard, to start a company without ever graduating. So, I tell sometimes audiences, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg's both have Harvard degrees, but we had to give them to them. They didn't earn them. And yeah, exactly. Then also, there's market pattern of students studying things that have basically no labor market value. If you go and you're going to study, women's studies, African American studies, employers aren't sitting around saying, other than educational institutions, I really would favor somebody with a women's studies degree. Now that woman could be studying women's studies at, I don't know if Princeton has a women's studies program. Let's just pretend that it does, and be a really good student and get a job on Wall Street because they're hiring Princeton. They're not hiring women's studies. But I'll give you another one. There are right now about 5,000 kids in the United States studying video game programming. How many video game programmers get hired in any year in the United States?
No
About
idea.
500.
Wow.
And
Right.
most of them are experienced.
Right.
So you're going, and they're all in Seattle, LA, and New York, I think.
I know that's
if you're
becoming a
going,
big thing in the military. video
Well,
game.
yes, yep,
Like it's
yep,
wild.
and actually things like the targeting systems and A1, M1, A2s are basically built on video game logic because the young troopers can use it. So if you're in, I'm just going to pick dead center of the country, Nebraska, and you're at a community college and you're studying video game programming, the odds that that's going to lead to employment are essentially zero. Students also significantly overestimate what jobs pay. Now this is where there are a couple of areas which are beginning to really blossom. So full disclosure, I'm the chairman of Western Governors University's board. That's the largest university in the United States. Our average cost for a 4-year degree is $15,000 total. And we have excellent, it's all asynchronous online. But it's not for profit. It's not University of Phoenix or something, no offense meant to them. But, we have really good employment outcomes. So there are new technologies for getting those credentials. Also, we're gradually building the capability. So a kid, and look at mytexasfuture.com would be a good example, where in Texas, you can get on a state often provided database and start talking about what you're interested in, and it'll tell you whether there are jobs in that field near you. It'll start telling you what certificates or qualifications you need to get the job and where to get them. And if you're in a Houston community college and you're aiming for a job and your campus doesn't offer that job, the system will tell you, oh, you've got to go over to Lone Star. Oh, you've got to go to San Jacinto for that. But you can do it. You just can't stay here at whichever college you were starting at. So we're beginning to get some solutions. Pretty soon we'll have AI coaches for that 17-year-old to begin to ask them, come on, tell me what's the thing you do that's most fun? Who are your heroes? Which one of your classmates do you respect the most? And begin to say, hey, you ought to do what high school counselors used to do, which is, see someone whose nose was always in a book and was writing for the school newspaper and said, have you ever thought about becoming a journalist? Or somebody who's always talking about cars, helping their buddies fix their car and say, hey, look, you love this stuff. Why don't you become a auto mechanic?
I keep coming back to this identity piece, and I feel like that's such a big part of this like decline in men in everywhere, like even in relationships. Like, look, a marriage is down. Like, I mean, how are you going to provide as a father if you don't have like a job that you can actually support a family with? So let's talk about that a little bit, because I feel like that's a big, or is it? I feel like there's this like redefining of men and masculinity and how things should be. We talked about emotional intelligence earlier. I mean, it's definitely one thing that we're seeing that we continually discover here on the show is this like kind of lack of emotional intelligence in men, which contributes to that identity crisis in some way, because it's like, where do I fit in? But what are your thoughts on like, this men and identity in the 21st century and working and education? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, a couple of things. First is, and we can see it right here on our campus, and we can see it in the research that the reduction of friendship and social interaction to being in 2 dimensions on a monitor of some type is a disaster.
Oh my God,
Um,
totally.
we have here at our college at Harvard, the last several classes have had the lowest percentage of driver's licenses held since the early
Wow.
1960s.
Mm,
So can you imagine in the
Whoa.
90s or 2000s, think back to when, and a lot earlier for me, when I got my driver's license, one of the greatest things that ever happened to me
Yeah.
happened, which is
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
back then, I was going to high school in Michigan, and they literally made up your driver's license at the police station after you passed your test,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and the officer made me 2 years older by accident. Typo in my date of birth.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Yeah,
A double bonus. My
so,
God.
I didn't say, "Oh, officer, I'm sorry." So I went from being the only
You're one week-
sophomore on the hockey team who no one really wanted to have on the team to being the most popular guy on the team.
I'm sure you did.
In any case, and I only changed it out like when I was in my 20s.
yeah, after you got past the drinking age,
after
right?
I got past it, because back then I was 18.
18.
But in
Oh
any
my!
case,
I didn't. Okay, wow. Yeah.
but the lack of socialization of people, I think also, I mean, I don't want to make too much of this, but we do kind of often try to insulate our kids from consequences, of failure. I know it's hackneyed that everyone gets a trophy and, great game, even though you lost 8-0 or whatever else. I'm not suggesting we become, psychotic sideline parents or something, but getting your kids to confront and deal with disappointment as opposed to paper it over. But the thing that is, we know, and you can be a deeply progressive sociologist or a very conservative sociologist, and you will absolutely agree on this data point that children are much more likely to prosper and thrive if they have a committed two-adult couple leading their household, period. And, if you are in this kind of marginal economic loop, the literature is compelling that women do look for men, heterosexual women obviously, look for men who show indications that they can be good providers. So, and I'm not trying to be melodramatic here, but if you look at where what are the attributes of societies that have really big political tumults, including civil wars historically, one of the leading indicators is a large population of young men who don't have a reasonable prospect of household formation.
Oh, wow.
And so this is not, this is not something to be trivialized.
Not at
Sure.
all.
Whether it's, gang involvement in major metro areas, whether it's deaths of despair, whether it's addiction, whether it's, not, we have a declining life expectancy in this country. I mean,
Yeah.
Is that
I
true
mean,
for
it's,
both men and women?
more men than women.
Okay.
Again, wow.
But we have lots of indications of deep social problems that are not the ones that are on Live at 5. They're more structural and they're much harder to fix. And why do we have now a birth rate below replacement level?
Mm.
Yeah.
US
exactly,
US
which is
always has
scary.
an out of jail free card, which is we almost every survey around the world, even in the 2 Trump administrations, when you ask somebody, it doesn't matter if they're from Bolivia, Bulgaria, China, France, if you weren't living in the United States, if you weren't living in your homeland, where would you like to live? US is always next, almost always next. So we can always turn on the spigot and beggar our neighbors for people. And we're doing that in things like AI. I mean, you want to meet all the really top British guys in AI? Go to Palo Alto, go to Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Mm.
You hear a lot of British accents. So, but we don't have, our natural fecundity rate is falling because too many people are in couples that are not going to form a stable household.
Mm, mm.
We have people who are less committed to that, as an expression of their personal values. And in a lot of major places, well, where would you live? Housing's,
Right.
Yeah,
housing in
too
Boston,
expensive.
our
It's
rate
ridiculous.
of housing construction in the last 20 years was half the rate of the previous 20 years.
Mm.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Boston is Massachusetts is now the third highest property property expense state after Hawaii and California.
You've done obviously a lot of work in this realm, and and you must have had some thoughts about like solutions to solve some of these problems. Like, what would be, your three things if you were like the Minister of Education? Like, what would you begin to implement in the educational realm in order to, make up this gap that men are having right now, and boys?
Well, if I were head of education in the United States, the first thing I'd do is stop picking on Harvard. Uh, uh, hey, look, we mean well enough. Give us a break, will you? Enough already. Why don't you go worry about, Vladimir Putin or something?
Yeah, so that's number one. Okay.
That's number one. I think that the number one thing we need to do, Will, is to put a
Mhm.
much greater emphasis on what I'm going to describe as experiential learning.
Yes, thank you for saying that. Perfect.
So apprenticeship is part of that. Everyone gets all worked up about apprenticeship, and if another person at the cocktail party tells me we need to be more like the Germans in apprenticeship, I'm going to move to Germany just to stop hearing about it. If when you go into an apprenticeship in Germany, you're basically going to have that job for the rest of your life.
Right, okay.
There's almost
Right.
no mobility out of those roles. So it's,
Mm.
and by the way, in Germany, you're told your 12-year-old isn't college material by the school. So I don't want to start
yeah.
doing that, particularly
Right.
in concealed
Little
carry
too-
states in the United States, because don't. So so more paid internships, more high school programs that are designed so beginning in 10th grade, you're beginning not to go on a visit to a company. You have a track, you don't have to do it, where you can start saying, I'm going to now, as part of getting my diploma, work at 10th grade, maybe it's 2 afternoons a week. Then in 11th grade, it's 3 afternoons a week. Then in 12th grade, it's 4 afternoons a week. It could be an office setting, it could be a construction company, it could be a car dealership, where also in part of the same program, increase the ease of access and instances of what's called dual enrollment, where kids in high school start taking some courses at the community college.
Yeah.
So that's another form of this.
Yeah.
Um,
A
I
step
think
into secondary education, right? Or a step into
yes, and
right.
some of the
Yes.
experiments are quite promising. That it isn't that some they aren't that big, but the people, high schoolers who are doing these apprenticeships in a state like Colorado, often just get a full-time job where they're working. The company sponsoring them doesn't sponsor them in a role that they can fill with their eyes shut. They're trying to create a future worker. So if a car dealership says, "We'll take on 16-year-olds and start teaching them, um, how to repair cars," they're not doing it because they suddenly don't have a profit motive. They're doing them because they don't have enough mechanics, and a lot of the mechanics they've got are 60 years old. Now, notice when you do that, several things happen that we were talking about earlier. I suddenly have a coach.
Right.
I
Exactly. A
suddenly
mentor,
have
somebody to, yes. Yes.
when I show up as a 16-year-old, no one expects me to be highly productive in the role. I'm a kid. When I show up as a 19-year-old high school graduate and I got hired to the job, my supervisor thinks I'm going to be able to do the job, not that I'm starting my work-based learning experience. The kid, they say in the Navy, it all starts with a clock. For enlisted, you have to, teach them 0500 doesn't mean around 0500, I mean, or 0500 today, but we can negotiate about tomorrow, right? I find out, I show up at that car dealership. I wanted to look nice. I wanted to look mature. I put on my favorite hoodie. I show up. That foreman says, "Hey, come on, Joe. I'm going to take you back to your locker." hey, I really like your hoodie, but you can't wear loose clothing around machines like this. You can really get hurt, or who get it right. So we've got a shirt just like mine for you with your name on it. And what did Joe learn? Oh,
Right.
Feel
I got to think
part of the
ahead.
team.
Mhm.
But they care about me. They're thinking about me. I have my own
Mhm.
shirt. I'm going to take a selfie with
Yes.
my shirt and show
Yeah,
my
someone's got
buddies.
my back. Someone's got my back.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like, I mean, so important, right? Yeah, I love it.
I once saw an apprenticeship, the apprentice guy uh, r- being taught how to repair a jet engine on a Delta plane, and he's reaching in, and then he drops a tool down into the engine, and he's kind of going, "Oh shit!" Now what happens? They have to and the supervisor walks up, and of course, they've got like 20 different almost fishing rods that are highly magnetic. So they just reach in, they got the thing back in 15 seconds, and they get the poor the
Yeah.
poor kid look so relieved. But so you get that. I think we have to just acknowledge as a second priority that you're not going to be able to succeed with very poor social skills in the future, because as technology takes on more technical work, what's left in a lot of jobs becomes more human interaction. That's learned in childhood. If you've got the types of more distressed households or family units we were talking about earlier, Will, those are not going to be co-indicated with developing good social skills widely. It doesn't mean you don't have exceptions. So, how do we start teaching that? How do we use things like simulation technology to teach that?
Great idea. Yes.
How do we, use interventions of teachers? How do basically every third grader should have to stand up in English class once a week, every day of school, and read a couple of paragraphs out loud.
Right.
Because
Right.
if
Represent
they've never
what we
done
something.
did.
that when
Yes.
they're 16, they're going to be scared of
Mhm.
speaking in public.
Yeah. It's a great
So,
skill. A very important skill.
so
Mm.
we have to be honest about these problems. They kind of, oh, really, what we need to do is pay teachers more, and uh, I don't know, abolish Facebook or something. Well, the latter I might be fine with, but that we've already
Same.
tried that. We
Mhm.
for a decade, teacher salaries went up at 11% a year, and the results went down.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just not. It's just not. We have to
Yeah.
we have to be honest as a country right now. And I don't want to
Yeah.
get maudlin, but I think about this at the level of national security. I think about
Sure.
this as
Great
as
point.
expressions of patriotism. We
Yeah. If we
we
have an ignorant society, we're really going to suffer,
yeah, and
in
we
a lot of
can't keep
ways. But yes.
importing all the talent.
Right. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
all the data on skilled immigrants is they're a huge boon to our economy, and we should welcome them. We should stop illegal, undocumented, low skilled immigration. We should welcome. We shouldn't educate people in our universities who happen to be foreigners and then immediately essentially deport them, tell them they've got to leave. 70% of our STEM PhD candidates at Harvard are foreigners.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow.
So, once again, let's get real about what we're trying to accomplish and what it's going to take for our country to remain healthy and successful going forward.
I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Idiocracy.
Oh God. Yes, I have.
It's
I
a
haven't.
ridiculous movie. It's ridiculous, but it's
it's
also
getting more
scary.
and more true.
Yeah, it's almost more like a documentary. Essentially, what it is
Yeah.
those who are educated, they decide, hey, well, why would I want to bring a child into this society? Whereas those who are not educated and the kind of the lower levels of intelligence don't think about birth control, don't think about anything, and they're having kids. So essentially, society is becoming more and more dumb. And in this movie, it seems more like a documentary these days. But the other thing I had to laugh at is I saw a meme the other day that said, my psychologist asked me when my anxiety started. And then the answer was when I was in third grade and I was counting how many students there were before I had to stand up and read my paragraph. So we may, if we go that way, we may create more anxiety, but at the same time, more success. Last thing I wanted to ask was, so I moved to the States from South Africa. I moved here when I was 7, and a 7-year-old typically goes into second grade. Now, I had 6 months of first grade in South Africa because the academic year is January to December there. We moved here in August. So my parents thought, okay, well, he's had 6 months of school. Let's throw him into second grade. And I failed miserably. And after a few weeks, they realized, okay, you know what? Let's take him back and put him in the first grade. And there I succeeded. I excelled. And I continue to do that. What are your thoughts? You mentioned before, young men, their growth, their neurodevelopment is not as quick as young girls. What are your thoughts on starting school later for boys?
That's certainly a very interesting hypothesis. It's the leading advocate for it is my friend Richard Reeves, saying starting. Yeah, he's a wonderful guy, and if you're, I'm definitely the opener for Richard Reeves on a lot of topics like this. So, you know,
Well, you
Great
mentioned your
to have both of you.
podcast. I'm going to listen to. So, I mean,
Yep.
anyone else out there, like, what's your name of your podcast, Joe?
It's called Managing the Future of Work.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
Okay, perfect.
on
Yeah.
all sorts of, it's on all the platforms, and it's easily the number one kind of workforce oriented podcast for business people and policymakers, I'm pleased to say.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thanks. And we've got about 250 episodes posted now, so there's a quite rich array of people
Yes.
there.
I'm going to go listen to that for sure.
Starting later makes good sense. Changing the school day in some ways makes good sense.
What do you mean by that? Like changing the timing of the school day or opening up
yeah,
more recess?
well, particularly in high school, we insist basically on having the start and stop times driven by working hours, except that adolescents, they basically get to school at 8 o'clock and their brains are actually going to be functioning around 9:45.
Right.
So,
Okay.
those
Yeah.
early periods are lost.
I remember that.
The
I don't remember that.
how you more physical activity. I frankly I think the data is pretty compelling that single gender schools are better for most kids.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
The all boys schools are much more likely to do theater, be in the poetry competition, and be recognized as being, a good writer as opposed to, the guy that runs the literary magazine, haha. And for women, they're much more likely to do well in math and sciences. So when you get particularly for high schoolers, when you get all the gender role playing and all the hormones suppressed in the halls, you're really opening up an avenue for much better focus on learning and doing, and less concern about, do I have cool sneakers, or it's cool not to be a smart kid. Um, um, so I think that and just one other thing is we have to we're going to have so many opportunities now to improve teaching and learning with AI. So another one of our podcasts is with a graduate of our school named Sal Khan, who started something called Khan Academy.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've
he-
heard,
yeah.
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 The YouTube
Right.
channel is huge. Yeah.
Right.
Huge.
And if you talk to my students here, who are pretty good at school, if they got into the Harvard Business School, they still go to it sometimes. You look, show me that equation to unknowns again. It's been a while since I did math and anger type things. Um, the you know, Sal and his great team are working on things like have the AI have a dialogue with a student to tease out their thinking. But by the way, everyone in Miss Jones or Mr. Smith's class is using this tool, and Miss Jones is getting feedback from the AI about what the students actually know. So she teaches, let's say, paragraph structure to fourth graders and topic sentences, and the AI is looking at the writing the students are doing and saying, gosh, Joe has not written a decent topic sentence. Maybe you need to take him aside. Or really, sorry, but none of these kids can write a topic sentence. You need to go over that again. By the way, that's one final thing we need to do in school. There's very little data to suggest that homework benefits anybody.
Oh my gosh. We intentionally moved our kids. So my daughter, who was in third grade, when she was in first grade, she was at this one school here locally. It's a great school, at least. I mean, I think the school is great, but they were assigning her so much homework as a first grader. And what she should be doing as a first grader is coming home and going and play, free play time, like that allows them to develop. So we moved her to another school, and her homework, the amount of homework she has.
That's a great role model, John. You got to act when you've got a feeling like that.
Oh my gosh, we could not believe it. And I mean, the amount of time that we had to spend helping her was tremendous as well. Now her homework is cut probably into a third, if not even more. And she gets more time to play in the afternoon. And I see a lot less stress in this young girl, a third grader. Yeah.
Are you seeing any difference in education, John? From, you know what I mean? It's like lots of homework versus no homework, and she's like still excelling.
She's still killing it. She's still killing it academically.
Okay. Good to know.
But she's also developing social skills. She's also developing imagination, right? Like first grade, when she was at this other school, when she would go outside, she's like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, well, think about it. Just create something, play. And she struggled with that. Now she's going outside and creating games, playing like she's an avatar or something else. Like she makes stuff up, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great.
So
but what you ought to do, let's take algebra. What we do now in a typical algebra class is the teacher starts writing on the blackboard and explaining some concept. How you break down an equation in one unknown. And, working both sides of the equation, moving, variables back and forth and all that stuff. And then hands out a homework sheet where the kids go home and do problems. And then they get collected and they get graded and returned yet the next day. So we're now 2 days or 3 days out if they've got school math class every day, which they should. And they've already introduced another couple of concepts. But the 25 or 35 or 45% of the kids who either didn't do the problem set or did terribly on it are just accumulating more and more stuff they don't know. So then all of a sudden they get up 50 on the exam and they're like, I'm no good at math. You haven't been taught math very well is what really happened. So what should happen is the students should be given some concept, maybe through a YouTube channel, maybe as part of the textbook offer from a company like Pearson, maybe because a really clever instructor just does their own thing. Then they come in and they do the problems in class with the teacher. So the teacher's walking around saying, hey, Joe, you haven't really started. What's going on? And I say, I have no idea what to do. And so she can then say, okay, let me walk you through it. Whereas, Will and John are flying through the problems. And what they're told is, you can get out your English book to read, or, I've got some, special stumper problems if you want to work on those. So how many times do you remember yourself being in class where the convoy is sailing at the speed of the slowest boat? And if you're a clever student, what are you doing? You're saying, we're going over this again. I already get this. This is boring.
I'm
Mm.
bored.
And then, but
Yeah.
this should also, by the way, to get federal funding for any education, K through 12, 0 phones in class nationwide.
Mm,
Oh yeah, yeah, of
It's
course.
complete
agreed.
scourge. Just
Yeah.
sorry. I know those
Just
signal blocking, kind of sheets are expensive, but if we can
Yeah.
waste $1 trillion in Afghanistan, we can find a few $100 million to pay for those.
This has been wonderful, Joe. Like, I mean, it's
got me
it's
thinking.
nice. I know it got me thinking quite a bit, and there are. I just like we just need to engage more with young men. Is John sent me a message here before the show. He's like, have you ever considered becoming a big brother, or be part of the Big Brother program? Because one thing is very I appreciated you mentioning in this document is like mentoring, and that's really, and you just talked about like apprenticeship is a form of mentoring, and and that's where we really begin to engage and as a mentor. To a mentee, it's like they can ask questions, they can, and we lift each other up, instead of just like, oh, he'll be fine, like, oh, we'll figure it out or whatever, or, because if we continue down a path we've been on, educational, it's only going to bleed into the workforce, and, God, it's just men are just being left behind and just incredible numbers right now. So thank you for the work that you're doing and putting out there in the world. Or anything you want to say before we close? Yeah.
This is just the way you were illustrating it. Well, this is not something where people in their own lives or their own communities or their own workplaces, their own families can wait for somebody else to do something. You've got to
Yeah.
do something. So if you see
Yeah.
your daughter is being inundated with a lot of busy work and you don't see the merit in it, change it out. You see a teenager that is your nephew, your cousin, your neighbor's son is kind of increasingly hanging out in the basement. See if you can find something to get him or her interested in, and don't make it what you're interested in necessarily. You find out that they really like to. I have a really good buddy, high school friend, who is now retired, and he's a really good fly fisherman. And he's regularly working with his church and with a neighborhood group to find kids who don't, don't have many friends, said, oh, that would be fun to learn. Rob gets in a boat, takes them out, teaches them, develops a relationship with him, and he's exactly the type of man you'd want your kids around. He's just a great guy, decent, hardworking, smart guy. So there's not going to be some federal policy solution to this. In fact, this is an area in which the Fed's batting average is 0.94 or something. They've been hit by pitch more than they've gotten hits. So
yeah.
just own it a little bit.
Mhm.
Get involved. Yeah.
Get involved.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate your being here with us. And like Will said, appreciate the work you're doing and the light that you're shining on this challenge for America or the world as a whole. If someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach out if they had questions separately from what we've asked?
So I work at Harvard Business School. So if you just Google me, Joe Fuller, Harvard Business School, Future of Work, there'll be a couple of like ads for Future of Work companies because, they paid for the keywords, but you can scroll down on the Harvard Business School site. There's a bio page for every faculty member, and there's a little click where you can send me a short message. It's about 200 characters, I think. And I'll certainly respond to anything that's sent in that's serious and in good faith.
Yeah, you responded to me, so I very much appreciated that, which is why we got you here. And we'll also put a link to the article that kind of got me and Will thinking about getting in touch with you. It's a great article. So, Joe, thank you so much for being here with us today. Will, any last words to wrap it up?
No, just many thanks. And to everyone out there listening, like, get involved. Like, we get to lift each other up, but you have to just take some action And just by hearing Joe's words today, hopefully they've inspired you to take some action, because we really, what's another 10 years like this? Like, God, it could be really devastating to our entire society. So thank you,
Well,
Joe.
thank you
for your
both
time.
for having me. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed myself.
Same.
As did we. And for our listeners, our audience, our community, thanks for tuning in. If you got anything out of this, which I know you did, please share it with your friends, your family, your cousins, your nephews, your neighbors, just like Joe was saying. So again, thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.